Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are moving on to the next episode in my category breakdown series, and in this video we are taking a look at the best adapted screenplay. And as always, if you're new to this series or to this channel, basically all this series is just every single video we're taking a look at a different category at the Oscars, and we're taking a look at all of the nominees there. So we're going to announce the nominees, and then just talk about some facts about those nominees, and then at the end we're going to put my personal ranking of the nominees in order and my prediction for how likely it is that I think they win the Academy Award on March 2nd. So without further ado, let's take a look at the nominees, and the first nominee is A Complete Unknown. Screenplay by James Mangold and Jay Cox. This is James Mangold's fifth Oscar nomination, and he is still looking for his first win. He was nominated 3 times this year for writing, producing, and directing A Complete Unknown. He was also nominated in 2020 for producing Ford v Ferrari, and in 2018 for writing Logan. This is Jay Cox's third Oscar nomination. He was also nominated in 2003 for Gangs of New York, and in 1994 for The Age of Innocence. The film is based on the 2015 book Dylan Goes Electric by Elijah Wald. A Complete Unknown is also nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the BAFTAs. Now, I think with the Best Adapted Screenplay category, I do think that there needs to be some kind of consideration, I think, that goes into factoring in how well you did adapting the source material, or how you were able to transcend the original source material and transcend it from the book or the play, or whatever you're basing your story off of, how you're able to transcend it to the screen. Now, unfortunately for all of these, I am not familiar with the original source material on all 5 of these, and I'm willing to bet that the majority of voters probably aren't as well. So while I do think that that's an important part that I think needs to be kind of considered when you are voting for these, ultimately I do think that a lot of this just comes down to how the story is and how the story goes, and that's kind of what the voters are going to think of when they think of the screenplay, and not necessarily too much anything about how well it's adapted from the original source material. So just starting with the story here for A Complete Unknown, I do think that the story is interesting in the sense that I've said this before in a couple of my videos where I'm talking about A Complete Unknown. Part of, I think, what makes the film work for me is kind of an extension of the screenplay, and it is the decision of just telling this particular moment of Bob Dylan's career, telling the story about Bob Dylan going electric, instead of doing what traditional biopics have done over, the past several years that we're in this, musician biopic renaissance, if you will, where a lot of these will take a musician and we tell their story from start till death, and we focus maybe 20 minutes per age, and the movie is just kind of going along, and maybe there is one section of their life where we kind of focus on a little bit more, and that's where the big controversy is, but then we still have another 40 minutes afterwards as they're continuing to just move on past that, get older, and then eventually die at the end. And I do think that this film, and the screenplay in particular, does a very cool and a very interesting thing, to me at least, where instead of just telling us that story of, early Bob Dylan to present day Bob Dylan, here's what happened, here's what led us to present day, we just looked at a certain monumental moment of his career, a big moment for him and for the music industry, and we're just going to tell you this story, which I think is what is really cool. And I do think that the screenplay does an excellent job of a lot of different things, and I think this kind of goes hand in hand with Timothée Chalamet's performance, as well as Monica Barbaro's, where you have these, and Edward Norton as well, where you have the 3 nominated actors as well, in their respective categories, where they're all playing real life musicians. And again, I'm not super familiar with any of the musicians that they're playing, so I can't say to great confidence that the dialogue is accurate or it's a great portrayal of them. I do think that they did take their time and their care and made sure that they kind of had the dialogue, or especially for Timothée Chalamet's case, kind of getting some of the cadence down, especially when singing. It's not a perfect match, but I think he's doing a great job of kind of getting the essence of Bob Dylan through his performance. And so I do think that that's one thing that is kind of more so performance based, but through where the direction that the screenplay took them, of making sure that the screenplay is pushing them in the right direction, of making sure that this is an honest and a fair representation of the characters that they are portraying. And A Complete Unknown does have that distinction with it as well of being, let me actually do a quick double check, I guess it's not the only one based off of, true events. It maybe is the only one based off of kind of like public celebrities, and so it is the one that is kind of based off of a whole lot of real people, and so you're getting, not just kind of our main characters in this, but you're getting, a Johnny Cash kind of coming in, and you're getting these just different musicians and these other, kind of famous or influential people in the music scene, especially the folk music scene at this time. So you're getting so many different real life people, so many different characters, and I think that getting a screenplay that is able to portray and bring in so many different of these characters and these real life people, and giving them these honest and full of care type of performances that you get out of them, I think is really just a testament of how great the screenplay really is. For my personal ranking, I am putting A Complete Unknown in 4th, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in 5th. The next nominee is Conclave, screenplay by Peter Strawn. This is Peter Strawn's second Oscar nomination. He was also nominated in 2012 for Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. The film is based on the 2016 novel of the same name by Robert Harris. Conclave won for Best Adapted Screenplay at the Critics' Choice Awards and the Golden Globes, and is also nominated at the BAFTAs. And if you've seen any of the previous kind of category breakdown videos on this channel, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to you where I have Conclave and where I'm ranking this, because one of the best parts, probably the best part about Conclave, is the story. It's a story that, just the initial premise, I think, the process of electing a pope, I think that could be something that could be told in a very straightforward and or boring manner. And I think it's something that, if you watch another film that maybe tackles this would kind of be maybe like a point of the story, but it would kind of just be like something that's maybe kind of happening in the background, or it's something that is resolved within, a matter of minutes. I don't think a lot of films would have taken the time to show out this long, dramatic, exaggerated process of electing a pope. When this film decides, no, this is that's the interesting thing. That's what we're doing here, and so we are, going to stretch this out. I think it's maybe 3-4 days. It's probably even longer. But over this long time that we're kind of also sequestered here, all of these cardinals are brought together, and we're in this building, and it's this kind of chess game and it's this constant kind of the idea of the story being this tense kind of almost I hesitate to call it a thriller, although there are moments that are just thrilling and captivating about it, because it's not your typical thriller. I mean, it really is. We're electing a pope. That is kind of what we're doing here. But the way that the screenplay is able to get you kind of so anxious and on edge so often in this film, and it does this great job of kind of constantly getting you through this idea of we're following these characters and we're seeing like, okay, here's who we're rooting for. This is what the outcome we're rooting for, and here's we're trying to make sure that this guy doesn't get elected, so here's our best, here's who we're all putting our votes on, and then, something will happen, and then, maybe a candidate will kind of either drop off or they're just not getting the votes, and so okay, now we're kind of having to regroup and we're moving over here, and it's this constant kind of shifting, and this thing of they're trying their hardest to make sure that they're settling on the perfect candidate to beat, the particular candidate that they fear will set the Catholic Church back. And so they're doing, it's this kind of this really just fascinating and tense thing where you are just so gripped watching people writing down names on a piece of paper and reading off names as we're getting the updated vote counts each time they do a new vote. Okay, this time so and so jumped this many votes. Okay, you're kind of following and you're thinking, okay, now we need to get this group of people in, or we need to get the people who are voting for X, Y, and Z at the bottom to change their votes. And so it's this kind of just this you're kind of going back and forth. It's this drama, this gossip of making sure that we're on the same page and we're doing what's best and we're voting for this person, and why you're voting. What does your vote mean? Is this is it something you're just willing to vote for whoever that's for the greater good, or are you only going to vote for one person that is the absolute like perfect candidate in your eyes? And it's just this fascinating thing of just something that I think on the surface you don't think it should work as well as it does, but just the way that the script just navigates so much of this film beautifully between again just the tension and the drama of the updated vote counts, as in addition to the people that are kind of dropping out of the race, and the controversies and the conspiracies and the drama that's kind of unfolding with certain characters, how that is impacting everything that's going on, just creates just a very kind of tense and just again, thrilling kind of experience for you as the audience member, which is something that I just didn't think I would say about a film about electing a pope, but sure enough, that is exactly what Conclave is. And one of the biggest reasons I love this film as much as I do is because of that screenplay. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting Conclave in first, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in first. The next nominee is Emilia Perez. Screenplay by Jacques Audiard in collaboration with Thomas Bittigan, Léa Mysus, and Nicolas Levici. This is Jacques Audiard's fourth Oscar nomination. All four of his nominations have come this year for writing, producing, and directing Emilia Perez, as well as writing the song El Mal from Emilia Perez. This is the first Oscar nomination for all three of Thomas Bittigan, Léa Mysus, and Nicolas Levici. The film is based on the opera of the same name from Jacques Audiard, which was loosely based on a secondary character in the 2018 novel Écoute by Boris Razon. Emilia Perez was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the BAFTAs, the Critics' Choice Awards, and the Golden Globes. And we're continuing on our tradition here of talking about Emilia Perez, and I think you guys are going to know where I'm going to put this in my personal ranking. And this is one of those, I've said in previous categories, I have said that I'm not intentionally putting Emilia Perez in fifth just out of spite because, I don't like the film. I'm honestly ranking it amongst all the other nominees, and I think because of how little I like Emilia Perez, it is just kind of being reflected in fifth in all of these categories. And so there's a lot of these things. There's a couple categories where I've thought, if maybe the rest of the category wasn't so good, I don't necessarily hate certain things about Emilia Perez, like cinematography, at times it's not bad, and so it's one of those that's like I wanted to maybe put the cinematography a little bit higher, but the rest of that category was just so stacked, and so it just ultimately fell to fifth anyway. Here in screenplay, this is one of the categories where I'm pretty confidently just putting Emilia Perez in fifth anyway, regardless of the rest of the nominees. There is a lot here in this film that doesn't work, and one of the biggest catalysts for why I don't think that the film works as well as it maybe could have is kind of the story. It is one of those that I had the experience, and I'm sure pretty much almost anyone that has seen Emilia Perez has had this experience of someone in their life asking them, hey, what is Emilia Perez about? I'm hearing all these, it's getting all these Oscar nominations. I'm hearing all this buzz. What is the film about? And then you have to sit there and try and come up with like, okay, how do I describe this plot without just telling you everything? And then ultimately you kind of have to tell everything anyway. It's like the only way to really describe what this film is because it is trying so many different things. And I do think that if the script was a little bit more narrow-minded, if it wasn't trying to bite off as many things as it was, if it was maybe focused on, okay, maybe this is a story about the cartel. Okay, maybe this is a story about, a transgender, someone trying to transition from man to woman. This is a transgender story. Okay, maybe this is a story about, searching for the lives and those that have been affected and have been lost in the drug cartel business. Okay, maybe if this is kind of the idea of this is what we're trying to do. Okay, maybe if we're just trying to tell a soap opera, or okay, maybe we're just trying to do a musical. There's so many different things so many different, I mean, I haven't even mentioned Zoe Saldana's character as a lawyer, so maybe we're trying to tell a story that is more so focused on the law and the side of this law firm that she works for that's kind of the moral quandary that she has of working for a law firm that is trying to get criminals out of jail as opposed to, whether she thinks that criminals should be locked up. I mean, there's so many things that are happening here in Emilia Perez that I think if the script was tighter and was more narrow-minded and maybe only focused on 4 of the 9 different, plot lines or whatever is happening, I do think that there could have maybe been a more interesting and a more captivating story and something that I think could have made this film a little bit better. I guess I should just say in terms of the way I view it and the way I think a lot of people view it, because clearly it worked for the Academy. It worked in 13 different, or I guess 12 different categories for 13 total nominations. The screenplay did work for him, clearly earning a screenplay nomination here. For me, I do think, and I think for a lot of people that don't necessarily like Emilia Perez, one of the first things that you're going to point out as a reason why you don't like the film is kind of the screenplay. And it's not to say that it's not a good screenplay or not a great screenplay. It's just that it is so convoluted. There are so many things going on that I think if it was just a little bit tighter, I think it could have worked a whole lot better. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting Emilia Perez in 5th, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in 3rd. The next nominee is Nickel Boys. Screenplay by Ramel Ross and Jocelyn Barnes. This is Ramel Ross's second Oscar nomination. He was also nominated in 2019 for Best Documentary Feature for Hale County This Morning, This Evening. This is Jocelyn Barnes' fourth Oscar nomination. She was also nominated this year for producing Nickel Boys, as well as in 2019 for Best Documentary Feature for Hale County This Morning, This Evening, and in 2018 for Best Documentary Feature for Strong Island. The film is based on the 2019 Pulitzer Prize-winning novel of the same name by Colson Whitehead. Nickel Boys was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the BAFTAs and the Critics' Choice Awards. I will say that Nickel Boys is the one that, as soon as this film ended, out of all of the nominees here, this is the one that I was the most eager to actually go out and had that urge to find this novel and to actually read it and give it a chance. And that's saying a lot for me as someone who is admittedly not the best reader. I don't read a whole ton. I don't take out the time to read as much as I wish I would. And so this is one of those that for me, the film was so good, I had such a strong urge of saying like, oh, okay, I need to actually go out and take the time to find this and actually kind of understand this story a little bit more and understand, especially knowing that it is based off of kind of real life, the real events. And I do think that this is something that was just a story that just captivated me, and the way that the story is told here just gripped me. Now, I think that there are a couple things that when you first talk about, if someone is going to talk about Nickel Boys and they're going to tell you the things, that the areas that it shines and the highlights of the film, it's going to be the cinematography. I think is one of the things that for some people, whether that's a good or a bad thing, they'll tell you about it. And for me, I think it was a good thing. I really liked the idea and the focus, the vision that Ramel Ross had here, kind of directing this in that style of, in that kind of that first person, the POV style. I do think that it added a whole ton to the depth, and I think just kind of the emotion of the characters, as us just kind of seeing all of this through our characters' eyes, I do think was something that was just kind of fascinating and something that worked really well for me. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the second thing that I think a lot of people will say works really well with Nickel Boys, and it is Ramel Ross's direction. The way that he's able to have that vision and is able to execute on kind of a very singular and very poignant kind of just vision that he had for how he wanted to tell this story, I think works really well. And then that is kind of the third thing that works really well with this film, and what I think a lot of people will highlight and say is one of their favorite things, is this screenplay. The way that this film is told through, again, just through the conversations and through the experiences of these two kind of characters, kind of maybe for some people, I think kind of makes it feel like maybe it's limiting the story a little bit. There's so much of a bigger story that is kind of going on outside of just these two characters that we're not getting the whole thing here, but we're just kind of getting the experiences of these two characters. And I think that maybe doesn't work as well for some people. For me, I think it worked really well. It's similar. I don't know if this is a great comparison to make, but it's kind of similar, I think, like last year's The Zone of Interest, where we're following these specific characters, and there's so much else that's going on outside of what we're just seeing following these characters. And that just made it more haunting and more horrifying in The Zone of Interest, of like knowing that we're so close to seeing just these horrific events that are happening on the outskirts of what we're watching here, but instead we're kind of just being forced to watch this. And it's kind of the same thing. I get it's not a great one-on-one example, because in Nickel Boys, these characters, they are kind of a product, or they are experiencing the bigger systematic issues that are going on at this Nickel Academy, but again, there's still so much that's not exactly involving our characters. You hear about these different rooms, or the different things that are happening to some of these students, and there's some things where it's kind of hinted or alluded that something is about to happen to a character, but then we never see it, and maybe you also don't really see that character again. And so it's just kind of the thing of, because we're just focusing, the way that the screenplay is just told through the eyes really of our two main characters, just creates such a kind of gripping and saddening experience for what you're watching, knowing that there is so much also just kind of going along on the outskirts, that I think just is a compelling narrative structure for the screenplay. I will also say that something that works really well in the screenplay for me is there's some shots, and there's some kind of these things that are kind of spliced in that maybe don't make a whole lot of sense, and maybe they don't make sense to you on the first watch, and maybe you'll start picking up on them on a second watch. There's a couple things that now I've watched it a second time, I don't know if I'm necessarily still picking up on some of the things, but there is these kind of these transitions between scenes or things that are happening that are written in there, but then there's also these moments that are kind of written in that, maybe kind of feel a little bit out of place initially, but then you realize that it's kind of these shots or these moments that you're seeing, they're kind of like what's going to happen in the future. It's what's happening later in the screenplay, or what's happening later in the story. And so you'll get to the end and a moment will happen, and then you kind of remember seeing that shot that they kind of spliced it in there a little bit earlier. I think it's kind of something that works really. I think that's more, maybe a little bit more so the editing, but the way that the screenplay was written out to include some of those kind of maybe foreshadowing moments. Or there is the decision, and I mean, this is 100% the screenplay of one of our characters. There are these kind of, again, I've mentioned this, that sometimes these films, they'll have kind of like a flashback or whatever, to a previous time or whatever, and this film does like some flash forwards with one of our characters, and I think that those flash forwards add so much depth to our character in the future that you also, I think it kind of retroactively adds the depth back to him as we're watching him in present day, as you kind of get the headspace of where he's at and where he's kind of going into the future. And so you kind of get this cool kind of structure, this cool kind of foundation that you're building for this character that I think is just well done. And so there's so much about Nickel Boys that is just breathtaking, and it's a film that I absolutely recommend you watch. And again, so much of it, and the reason why so much of it works so well for me, is because of that screenplay. So for my personal ranking, I am putting Nickel Boys in third, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in second. And the final nominee is Sing Sing. Screenplay by Clint Bentley and Greg Quidar, story by Clint Bentley, Greg Quidar, Clarence Macklin, and John Devine G. Whitfield. This is the first Oscar nomination for all four of Clint Bentley, Greg Quidar, Clarence Macklin, and John Devine G. Whitfield. The film is based on the real Sing Sing maximum security prison and their rehabilitation through the arts program. Sing Sing was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the BAFTAs and the Critics' Choice Awards. Now, Sing Sing is such a fascinating thing for me, a fascinating kind of nominee at this year's Academy Awards, where we look at it and we say, the two things that I think that really worked for Sing Sing, and the reason why anyone who has seen it loved it and has fallen in love with this story and with just this film in general, it's the screenplay and it's the acting. Those are kind of the two biggest things that I think are what is, compelling you and making you interested in this story. Now, obviously, Clarence Macklin ultimately didn't get the Oscar nomination, unfortunately. He really 100% should have been in that lineup, but we still had Coleman Domingo get in. So you got Coleman Domingo, and you still got the screenplay, so it feels like you kind of had the two big key elements, and it felt like that was maybe all you needed for the film to kind of get that Best Picture nomination. And it's kind of interesting to me that ultimately, while the two best parts of the film that made it such a great film, they're both being rewarded, that didn't also result in that Best Picture nom. So I do think that it's kind of fascinating when you look at it from kind of the other way, where you say, okay, it's not getting Best Picture nominated, that means it's probably going to kind of be getting snubbed in some of the other categories. And you would think that maybe screenplay would be the category where then it would have got snubbed, but instead it stayed strong, and I think that that's a testament to how great this screenplay is. And I do think that part of what makes this screenplay so good is, I talk about four different people kind of being involved in the story and the screenplay, the actual kind of writing it down, because this film is based on real life events of these people at the Sing Sing maximum security prison, and a lot of the characters are playing themselves in this film. You do have, Coleman Domingo and Paul Raci, and I think there's a couple other, actors that are kind of filling in some of the roles, but so much of this amazing ensemble is from the characters and from the real life people themselves that went through this program, at the Sing Sing prison. And so I do think that there is something to be said there about this being a story told from the real life people about a real life event and a real life thing for them, and how they all kind of had bonded together and found this love of rehabilitation through performing and through theater and through acting, that being such an emotional and again just corrective and rehabilitating process and thing for them, a therapeutic thing that they were able to do, I think is just such a beautiful and a touching idea. And that's why I think that this screenplay is just so phenomenal, because of the human there's the humanity that's in it, the ability that you have as an audience member to be watching this and saying like, okay, I'm connecting with this film as as a whole, but then also realizing that there is like an additional step on top of that of I'm connecting with this film, which means I'm connecting with these actors and I'm connecting with them because this is their story, and that they are opening their hearts and telling you about how this program has was able to just kind of change and how they were able to heal through the power of acting, which I think is just absolutely beautiful. And so for this being kind of the one story here that is not only there's a couple here that are based on real life people and real life events, but this being the most kind of vulnerable and open and honest about all through all of the nominees here, I think is something that just makes this film so special for me. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting Sing Sing in second, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in fourth. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of the nominees in this category, and if there was anything else that you would have liked to have seen nominated. I'll be honest, I'm glad that Sing Sing got in, but like I was saying, I'm kind of surprised it still is able to hold on, and particularly maybe over something like I'm Still Here, a film that was able to kind of get this late surge that got it into picture and got it into actress and got it into international, but then doesn't kind of get the screenplay with it as well, which this year, between the two screenplay categories, there's 3 non-best picture films that ended up in the screenplay categories, and so that feels a little shocking to me when there is things like I'm Still Here, which is an amazing screenplay in and of itself that ultimately didn't get into the category. So that's one for me that I think I would have liked to have seen get into this category. But yeah, just let me know if there was any other films that you would have liked to have seen get in this category, and also if you'd like to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my future videos in the category breakdown series, I would greatly appreciate it, and have a great day.